so we are going to kick off this section with, with a conversation about assessment. And actually, why don't you speak about, because you said so well about the part in which assessment really plays in blended learning, and then we'll jump into some details.
Okay, so when we're thinking about assessment, we're thinking about the number of ways that we can find out where our students are in their learning path. And so sometimes we're wanting to do that before we learn, to give them some kind of survey to assess their interest or what they already know. And so many of the groups that we were out while we were lesson planning were asking, what should we use to do a pre-assessment, for example? Then sometimes we want to determine how the students are progressing through a project or to set up the expectations for their learning outcomes. So we're going to talk today a little bit about the types of assessments that you can do, that you can show the students online, and also that can cover projects, writing, and different ways that we might try to determine where our students are in their learning. So this is within Schoology.
So I wanted to start with this example because when I was sharing the first day we were together, or Tuesday, I guess the second day you guys were together, I shared how I'm using online discussions. And I know for some teachers, they were thinking, oh my gosh, that is so much to grade. What does it look like to grade when you're working online? And what's nice about so many online tools is there's strategies for assessment built right in. And so I was speaking with a teacher and explaining that when my students participate online, I think I said it to the whole group actually, I don't give every single post an A, a B. Instead, for many of the conversations, they earn participation credit or participation points like they would if they were engaging in conversations in my classroom as an active member of a conversation. But there are interactions online that I want to look at more closely, that I want to evaluate for particular elements and see where my kids are at in terms of those skills. And so here's an example of one of our online discussions, and I shared with the group of people who came to my flipped classroom session that I flip my vocabulary. And one exercise that they do, once they've seen the vocabulary, they've taken the notes, is I ask them to write a narrative. It can be a short story, it can even be a poem, where they use 10 of the 15 words. And so I want to assess their writing for two elements, two particular aspects of their writing. And Schoology allows me, with each online discussion, to decide, do I want to grade it? Do I want to design a rubric, which is a grading scale? Or do I not want to grade every single post? So for this one, I got to decide on the criteria, so the elements I was going to be evaluating. And I chose two things that were important to me, that I wanted to see my students doing when they were using the words. The first one is, when they use the words, are they communicating meaning? Is it clear to me what that word means based on how they're using it? Because I don't want them to just throw words in their story that don't make any sense. And sometimes students will try to do that. So I can, as I'm looking through, give them a 4, which means excellent. I can tell what the words mean. You're trying to communicate meaning by the way you're using them. Or 3, you did a good job. I could tell you tried. 2, satisfactory. It's okay. And then 1, needs improvement. So that's the first thing I'm evaluating. And students can see this. So if I click 3, they can tell they need to work a little bit more on trying to communicate meaning. The second part, because they're writing a narrative, and I want it to be interesting so other students want to read it and I want to read it. I want them to include things like dialogue or sensory details. I have this second point on my rubric, which says creativity of story. And they can earn, again, a 4 if it's really strong, all the way down to a 1 if it needs improvement. So as I'm going through and reading students' vocabulary paragraphs or their little stories or narratives, I can just click, click, click on these elements, and there's their score for their online participation. And then when they log into Schoology, they can actually see all of the scores they get on the work they submit online. So this is one way to create a rubric. I know you guys use Schoology. Do you want to follow up on that?
Right, so we also use this type of rubric for our projects that the students are working on, so we'll set up exactly that kind of criteria, and then also how they're being graded. And then writing, so we have a standard writing rubric that goes across all of the curriculum, so that in each discipline we're looking at the same types of standards and holding the students accountable for similar skills. A lab rubric, so we're going to talk quite a bit about setting up rubrics within Schoology, but it's also worth mentioning that we use polls, for example, when students go into Schoology. They can take a quick poll to indicate whether what their preferred learning style is, for example, and that might determine what classroom rotation they go to first, what their interest is in a specific topic. So there are a number of tools just within the same platform that you can use for different types of assessment.
Yeah, so this is actually just setting up the rubric. So going into, I wonder if I need to play this. Okay, I'll have Tiffany start it for me. But when you're going in and you're designing a discussion question, which I know some of you already did, kind of playing around yesterday and today, when you're in that online discussion kind of mode, you have, so here I am, this is actually one of my classes, and so each of my classes has like a symbol, so I upload a picture, and you'll see my different files. So I have resources, discussions, vocabulary stories, writing, Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. So I'm just opening up that vocabulary narrative that you're seeing, and then you'll see my grade scales at the top. What I like about this is students can also see this. So they know, okay, this is what Mrs. Tucker is going to be looking at my writing and evaluating me on. And then as I go down and I see the student's writing, I've already graded this student's assignment, and I can hover over it, and it actually pulls up the grade that I gave them. So I can review their grades, it's saved in the online grade book, and they can see their grades as well. So there's a lot of transparency about if I am grading a particular piece, what is it I'm evaluating and how did they do? Now, if I'm starting a discussion, you have your title and your description, but at the bottom, you just click Enable Grading. And once you enable grading, you can create different rubrics for different kinds of online interactions. So I have a rubric for my vocabulary stories. I have a rubric if I'm going to have them do a piece of argument writing. I have a rubric for, analytical evaluations of the text or analytical kind of discussions of the text. And once you create a rubric, it saves them. So I can reuse the rubrics. So like Tiffany's saying, there's consistency. I'm using the same rubrics for the same type of assignments. Students know what to expect. They know what I'm looking for. And I can add to my rubrics at any time and make a new one if I don't have a rubric that is appropriate for whatever the task is. So you have this ability to add them. And then when you're putting your rubrics together, you can actually add, that was not helpful that I did that. Okay, so you can't see it because I stopped the video too soon. But you can choose however many criteria or elements that you want to focus on. You can write the description for what it is you're actually evaluating, and you can decide on the points that you're going to grade it out of. So you have a lot of flexibility as a teacher. Now, we're also going to show you how to make rubrics outside of Schoology, in case you're working with young kids and you're thinking, yeah, I don't think I'm probably going to use Schoology, but this is just a discussion, or I just want to share this with you since we talked about online discussions, and I know some of you are wondering, well, it just seems like a lot to assess, or I'm not sure how I would assess it.
When I create online discussions in Schoology and check it as graded, it's very easy, even from your phone, to go and to just enter the grades. So you can do that walking around the room or when things are, so it's extremely efficient so that you're not having to carry an additional burden for grading everything. So the other thing that we use frequently in Schoology, which you saw a little bit in Socrative and also in Kahoot, is the ability to create a little mini quiz or some kind of comprehension check. You can do that within the platform and then actually grade it from within the platform, or set it to automatically grade, and it actually will then take the grade and just put it right into the grade book from that assessment, which is, again, extremely efficient.
Yeah, so anybody, and a lot of you guys talked about using Socrative and Kahoot in your lessons, and I know those are great ways, at least for me, to check in with kids, see where they're at, really make sure that they're understanding the content, and then actually Socrative, you can see a student's progress over time. So there's more metrics involved in that, which is kind of nice for teachers. One very simple tool, and I actually took this picture in this one in English, but if you look up in the corner, it says Rubistar in Espanol. So you can create rubrics, those grading scales with the things that you're going to evaluate very easily on this website. And the reason I want to share this with you is because they've already done a lot of the work for you. So when you go to Rubistar, you can actually see rubrics that other teachers all over the world are creating and have already done. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you're doing a project and you're thinking, gosh, I want to make a rubric, but I'm not sure where to even get started. So I'm going to show you. You can also design your own rubrics. So I'm going to show you the screencast of this, and I'm going to have to hop, will you hop down and start that, to show you what that looks like. And you guys are actually going to be designing your own rubrics, and you can use this. This would be a great place to start when we get to that activity. So here I am at the home page, and you can kind of scroll around and see what's there and check out the rubrics that are already created. You can click to create your own rubric. So if you're already thinking, oh, I have an assignment, I would like to see what it looks like to create a rubric for this writing assignment, or a project, or maybe an oral presentation, they have categories of rubrics that you can open. And so this one, as it scrolls down, you'll see it asks you for some information. But then once you've decided on the type of rubric or the type of assignment you want to assess, then you actually can pull down from the different categories and choose what categories you want to focus on. Organization, the information in there, just any detail that you're looking for that maybe you've told students, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do this other thing. And then once you choose it, it pre-populates 1 through 4 with descriptions for that particular element that you're going to be grading. And you can erase it, and you can change the language so it reflects what you're really looking for, or it sounds more like your voice. But what I love about this is you don't have to come up with it all from scratch by yourself. And a lot of times I just borrow language from Rubistar when I'm creating my own rubrics. So when we break and you guys have a chance to design a rubric, I would start with Rubistar and check it out, because you're going to save a lot of time beginning there. Did you want to say anything about Rubistar, or are you good?
So yes, don't try to create a rubric for every single thing. You can create them to be pretty general and apply them to a number of assessments that you're giving that correlate with your class. Because we will frequently use the same rubric for several different projects because we like them to be very open-ended and creative. And so you really don't want to put a lot of very specific conditions on it. And don't reinvent them when you can find them, for sure.
And I just wanted to show teachers. So from Rubistar, you can actually print out. So if you want to still do your rubrics in paper, you could. I actually take the ideas from Rubistar, help me get started, and then since I use Google Documents with my students, I just create a table in my Google Documents for whatever the assignment is. So this particular one was for a digital story that my students worked on. And I pulled over the elements, so I identified what it is I'm going to be evaluating. And then I have descriptions from 1 to 4, 1 being in need of a lot of work, and 4 being exceptionally strong. And then I just go through and I highlight where I think the student falls in each of the categories, and then I add up the points at the end. But I absolutely agree with what Tiffany is saying, and for me, I use one rubric for all argumentative writing. I use one rubric for all informative writing. I use one rubric for all research writing. And students get used to understanding what are the key skills and elements am I looking for as their teacher. I also, if we're doing a new kind of project, I always give my students the rubric at the start of the project. I want them to know exactly what I'm going to be looking for. I don't want it to be a mystery. I want them to know how can they earn the best possible grade on this assignment. So think about that also.
So in thinking about classroom rotation, one of the reasons why rubrics are very important is because you want that project space, that rotation station to be very self-directed, and for students to be able to work in the project space while you're working with the group that is in the direct instruction, they have to have very clear understanding of what they're supposed to be working on. And so if you go through the rubric ahead of time, when we run the rotation stations within our classroom, the students know when they get to the project station, they're pulling up the rubric and they're starting from that to continue their work in that project. I'm going to create now. Yeah. So now it's time when we make you do the work.
Okay, so what we're going to ask you to do, and you can do this on your own if you have an idea, you know exactly the assignment you want to work on a rubric for, or if you're in an elementary team or you're in your department as math, you can work together and collaborate. But my suggestion would be go to Rubistar and start there. Take a peek what rubrics are already there, then choose one you like, and then make it your own by changing the language, deciding on the criteria or the elements you want to grade on. And Tiffany and I will circulate if you guys need help or support.
So the preview of what it looks like when a student goes into it after you've set it up, they see begin, test, or quiz. And then basically, from the student point of view, you can answer these questions. These are actually all on blended learning because at some point I was doing professional development surrounding a classroom rotation model. And so the questions were, the rotation model is the same as the flipped class model. True or false? So true or false? You think false, yes. So this is just a way to gauge what do I need to review in the professional development, but also to show them this is how your students see a quiz in Schoology. So it's just another form of assessment aside from the rubric assessment that you saw Catlin demonstrate earlier within the same tool. And so the goal in any time you're choosing a tool to implement in your blended setting is you really want to look at the tool and say, how much can I get out of this tool? Because you don't want to have 100 things that you need to use. So when we look at a tool and we say, okay, something like Padlet, what can I use it for? I can use it for a ton of things. Schoology, in what ways can I use it to assess? In what ways can I use it to communicate? So you're really evaluating the tools that you're putting in your toolbox so that you can get the most out of them. And this is one that has a lot of assessment potential. The other thing worth noting, and that Catlin showed you, I think, earlier on the rubric and on something like this, you can comment to your students And when the grades come in, or when you're entering grades, you can make comments to them so that they get the feedback in addition to the grade itself. They get the comments that you put in there. You can also control settings like if it's open or it's closed before a certain time, how many times they can attempt it. So if you want to set up a quiz that you want to let them take it multiple times, you can do that. Or you can put it, nope, you can take it one time and that's it. You can set it so that the questions are timed or not timed. So there are a lot of different settings that you can control just within the same exact tool.
Students taking the same quiz several times. Is there a way you can flip the questions or something like that? Rebel, yeah. Is the same material but in different orders, so they really know, because they can learn the answers.
So yes, there's a setting that is randomly, like it'll randomly give them the questions. Also, there are different question types. So you could do matching, multiple choice, true or false, or you can have something more open-ended. And obviously, Schoology is not going to be able to grade the open-ended questions. So you're going to go in and you're going to grade those. But the other things that are objective and that have a right or wrong answer, it will grade them automatically. So.